We now have more clarity than ever before regarding the direction of the Utah Jazz, particularly for this season, and what the implications could be for next season can genuinely be roughly estimated based on what moves have been made in last night's game, as well as what the rest of the season will be looking like from a starter standpoint and just the rotations that we see Will Hardy put out on a nightly basis. With that being said, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. If you like the Utah Jazz, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. We do this almost every day. Let's go ahead and get into this one. Everybody knows that Keyonte George has, to a certain degree, been that lovely little boy wonder that a lot of people would like to talk up and believe that he is the all-star caliber player at some point in his career that could be the missing piece and the missing cog in the machine for the Utah Jazz in their rebuilding process. We know what Walker Kessler is. We found out that Ochai Agbaji wasn't going to be the most ideal candidate, and so he got traded away in that Kelly Olynyk deal to the Toronto Raptors. But we also have Brice Sensabaugh and Taylor Hendricks, who now will have more minutes available to them, more so for Taylor Hendricks because he does play more of that big role, and he can kind of fit in as a wing, which is why Agbaji and Olynyk being removed affords him and also THT more minutes to play on the court. Understanding this, after the game against the Golden State Warriors, in which they lost 107 to 129, things really got a little bit itchy, because not only was it a 22-point loss, and admittedly not the worst loss that the team has incurred during this season, it was another one under the reign of Keyonte George being the starting point guard. And while that may not seem that significant, when I go through his stat line and explain exactly why I feel that way, I think you might come to feel the exact same. Getting into it, he played 29, almost 30 minutes. In that time, he shot 2 of 10 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3, had 1 rebound, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, and 1 personal foul. Not good shooting, didn't turn the ball over too much, but just really bad shooting splits, right? Box score plus minus of a negative 32. Now, the issue with starting him in this game, admittedly, you want to get him those live action reps, as he has had the most for any of the 3 rookies this entire year. Again, he started a 16-game span earlier on in the season after THT got switched out, and that didn't really bode well for him. There weren't that many W's to speak of, and for the most part, he underperformed from a shooting standpoint and defensively. He's continued to be unimpressive defensively, and offensively things have gotten a little better some games, but over the past 2 specifically, things have really taken a turn back, and he's regressed to his prior form, which isn't that efficient. Now, on the season, he's averaging 11.2 points, 2.8 rebounds, and 4.2 assists to go along with 2 turnovers, and he shoots 38.2% from the field and 32.9% from 3 to go along with a respectable 82.1% shooting from the free throw line. So the shot is there, and he is capable of hitting jumpers. But at the same time, while he shoots better from 3 off of the dribble, he needs to develop into the person that can shoot off of the catch, which should admittedly be a little bit easier, all things considered, since most people are a lot better at shooting off the catch and suck at shooting off of the dribble. He kind of has the awkward switch, but that just goes to show that he has the capability of being a shooter, also detailing the fact that he shoots 82% from the free throw line. While it might not be on the most attempts per game, it's still on a significant enough amount to go ahead and warrant some level of importance. After the game, in the press conference, when the media was asking questions to the guys and to the coach Hardy, Will Hardy had this to say about moving Keyonte George into the starting lineup. He said, "It's time. Keyonte stepping into that role is ultimately what's best for our team moving forward." To give people a little bit of a grasp and understanding of just what Keyonte has done in his starts, these are his overall stats in starts. Now, mind you, he's had 17. He averaged 12.2 points, playing in 28.3 minutes per match, had 3.2 rebounds, 5.8 assists, half a steal, 2.5 turnovers, and shoots 33.5% from the field on 11.2 attempts, and shoots 30.6% from 3 on 5.8 attempts. Overall, from the free throw line, he shoots 79.4% on 3.7 attempts, which admittedly isn't that great, and so I default to the game that we just played against the Golden State Warriors because that's the most recent, and most of his starts were from significantly earlier on in the season when we were not on our winning streak. So considering the fact that he was alongside Jordan Clarkson, who doesn't really serve as a great backcourt mate for him, really the only person that he does the best with is probably Chris Dunn, because Chris Dunn has that effectiveness on defense. He's also a heavy communicator, and at roughly the same size and similar weight, he also has the ability to show Keyonte George how things are done while also educating him on how he does it and what he needs to do to be just as successful as himself. Understanding this though, after losing this particular game against the Warriors, there was so many questions in the air, particularly because Keyonte George was given the start, considering the fact that if Chris Dunn had started, this team probably wins. Again, in roughly 20 minutes of action, Chris Dunn had a box score plus minus of a +7, despite going 1 of 6 from the field and honestly just not having his best shooting night ever. He did have a decent number of rebounds, assists, he even had 3 steals to go along with it and didn't turn the ball over to an egregious degree. Because of that, he was able to really lock in and gave Curry a lot of trouble. However, for somebody's first initial matchup against Stephen Curry in the season, it was a very bad game to start Keyonte George. We saw last game against the Suns, we saw Taylor Hendricks get about 17.5 minutes, guarding Kevin Durant for the majority of that time. And while he did get broke off a few plays, he also had his own plays against Kevin Durant, most notably being the block at the rim. But at the same time, Taylor Hendricks just has a better feel for defense. He has a higher defensive IQ, and it seems like he just has more knowledge of where he needs to be on the court. His shooting needs a little bit of work simply because when it comes to him being in motion, he struggles a little bit, but when he's stationary and has the opportunity to just get a simple catch and shoot, he does tend to get the job done. I believe that his game will translate significantly better for the Utah Jazz system than Keyonte George has so far, and honestly, I'm slightly tempted to see if Bryce Sensabaugh can make the most of a possible opportunity in the upcoming minutes, but I don't 100% know for certain just yet. I need to see a little bit more of Keyonte George before I jump the gun. Now, the Utah Jazz, after losing this one, went from being 1 game under 500 to now 2 games under, and the reason why it's significant is because they lost to the Warriors, who were at 500 and are now 1 game above 500. Effectively losing a game that would have put us back in the 10th place and inside of the play-in role. In that same situation, the 9th seed is the Los Angeles Lakers, who are finding their footing once again. They are currently 28-26. Now that's problematic because we really expected a lot from our guys and we thought that they would be able to get the job done. It just hasn't really panned out that way, and things are not looking on the up and up. Since the trade deadline, we lost Fontecchio, we lost Kelly Olynyk, we lost Ochai Agbaji, who were all 3 key role players. And while they didn't have the most magnanimous degree of effect on the team, you would argue that they all played a decent enough role to affect wins and losses. After trading them, we were still optimistic, and I myself individually, after coming to terms with the fact that Danny Ainge was doing what is best in favor of the Jazz franchise future, it still didn't sit well because those guys had a chemistry like no other. So it put guys in a situation because the players were under the mindset that they were going to go to the playoffs with that roster that they had. And considering that Danny Ainge decided to blow it up and not have that conversation with certain guys like of course, Lauri Markkanen, who's supposed to be the heart and soul of the team, it kind of rubbed a lot of guys the wrong way inside that locker room. Reporter Sarah Todd actually had this to say in regards to the state of the locker room after the game. It is very clear that the Jazz players feel pretty apathetic post-trade deadline. That's not great for wanting to build championship culture hype. That just goes to say that they're displeased. Nobody expected this team to end up in this sort of waters. You also saw them trade those 3 supporters for 3 lesser guys that ended up, one being bought out in Kevin Knox, and I guess a first and a second round pick, which are effectively not really the most useful in the moment, though they could potentially be in the future. There's no guarantee of that as well. Andy Larson actually had this to say after the game himself. That might be the single most frustrated locker room I've ever seen after a regular season game. It's because it's not about tonight, it's about where the team is for the rest of the season. Basically alluding to the fact that once Will Hardy elected to go ahead and sit Chris Dunn on the bench and put Keyonte George into the fire before we all see him to be ready, they're conceding the rest of the season and willing to tank. Now, if that is the case, then you might as well just roll out the entire bench and allow those guys to run. Let Taylor Hendricks get the start over somebody. Let Bryce Sensabaugh get the start. Let Kira Lewis Jr. get some burn, for Pete's sake. Because it puts you in a situation where you have all these guys that have been playing for something all season, and now it was all completely pointless to them. Now, the team's over-under for the season was roughly 35.5 games, and I still think they have the ability to go ahead and supersede that. But with Keyonte George at the helm and his high level of inconsistencies, particularly as a starting point guard, I just don't think that that's likely anymore. I believe that 35.5 is actually pretty accurate. We might end up winning closer to 34 games, if I'm going to be quite honest. With Chris Dunn at the helm, I had them predicted to actually hit 40 wins out of their 42, even after the trade deadline. So with this little switch at the helm and Will Hardy letting everybody know that he plans on sticking with it, it puts a lot of guys in some uncomfortable positions because there's only but so much you can say about it. In this one in particular, it was a rough matchup because there looked like no point in the game where Keyonte George could put up a fight of his own. Not only did he hit very few shots, but he also could not guard Stephen Curry for the life of him. Reporter Andy Larson also had this to say about the matchup. One of those youthful, inexperienced games for Keyonte so far. He looks tired, playing more minutes than usual, and chasing Steph around screens and keeping up in transition has worn him out. And quite honestly, he did look tired. But he also looked completely out of his element because you took a guy that doesn't play defense to the highest degree overall and just genuinely struggles on that side of the ball and forced him to be something that he has never been needed to be before and quite honestly never been forced to be before. And you put him against the greatest shooter that the NBA has ever seen. So every time he makes a mistake, he is punished for it and put on full display. It's very difficult because there's no perfectly ideal scenario for him in this world, and really he's going to catch a lot of hate because of his upcoming play. We do believe in giving experience to rookies and letting them play on the court in meaningful games. But if you throw somebody out there and the team ends up going down egregiously and he just gets cooked the entire time, there's no learning experience in that. There's just a whole bunch of tape of you being a poor basketball player, and really that just destroys somebody's confidence. Keyonte George needs a boost, not a setback. And if you submerge him too much, he's going to drown. He's not going to learn how to swim. It genuinely concerns me that we're willing to go this far for him in particular, because I believe that he's one of those guys that just is going to take a little bit more time to cook and get ready. Taylor Hendricks to me seems like a player that you can play now, and even when he's not hitting his shots, he plays defense so well, his issues are relatively negligible across the stat line, and at worst, he's going to be a slight negative. For example, today, in his 19 minutes, he only had a box score plus minus of a -2, despite going 0 of 2 from the field, with both of those shots being 3-pointers. He also had 4 rebounds and 1 block to go alongside that. Understanding this, it makes things a little bit frustrating for the Jazz faithful, because not only are the fans frustrated because they didn't want to go into a rebuild, they wanted to see a genuine playoff team. It also makes the players uncomfortable because they wanted to go to the playoffs as well, and they wanted to play meaningful basketball games. So when you consciously decide to switch your lineup and put a man who's not ready for the fire to go ahead and jump out there, it makes things very difficult, because not so much that the older guys don't believe in him, but they also comprehend that he's not there yet. And so you're putting him in the line of fire when he's just quite simply not ready to deal with the kitchen. It's too hot for him. And we saw it today when Stephen Curry was doing him dirty, and then there was so many coverages in which you saw him go under the screen or go with the roll man or not play high enough on the screen. And again, this is Stephen Curry. This isn't just some guy who's okay at shooting threes. This isn't a guy that is more of a slashing type point guard. This is a guy who makes his living from beyond the arc. So if you go under a screen, he will punish you. If you don't pay attention to the screen, he will use the screen. And if you run along the court with him and you don't pay attention to what he's actually doing, you'll get lost in the sauce. And that's what happened to him the entirety of the game. There was no saving Keyonte George, and when they kept putting him out there on that floor, he kept getting flambéed every time Steph Curry got the opportunity. Now, there was other matchups that he saw against Klay Thompson and other of the smaller guards, but those matchups didn't go particularly well for him either, and that was honestly a slightly concerning part. But considering that most of his reps were against Stephen Curry on defense, those are the ones that I wanted to focus on. I do understand that obviously as the rookie who's playing Steph for the first time, it was going to be a rough game. He was going to be shell-shocked. But there was no genuine point in the game where I felt like he even remotely had a tit-for-tat play. He never had one opportunity where he really went after it. And overall, things just looked pretty ugly through and through, to the point where the game was out of reach when he was in the game, but when he was out of the game, things looked a lot more respectable, and it looked like a genuine basketball game that you will want to go to watch. But I digress. Maybe you guys disagree with me. Do you believe that Keyonte George is ready to start? Or do you think it's going to take him a lot more time, and this is a clear sign of concession from the front office and the coaching staff saying that we're going to go ahead and tank this year so that we can keep this year's draft pick and convey next year's instead? As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say in the comment section. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications, and become a member to help support the content. With that being said, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.